Hello everyone. I'm going to be starting us off on the Unit 3 videos. I'm going to be talking to you about how we classify muscles and how we name them. So it's basically some very simple information about getting us started on muscles. Okay. One of the basic things you need to know about muscles is that they work in pairs. One muscle, as you can see here, is going to take these bones and bring them closer together, or contract them. Now, the other muscle that's on the back side is going to do the opposite thing. It's going to cause the bones to move further apart. And if you remember your muscle movements, you can think about flexion and extension. Flexion means bringing the bones closer together. Extension means taking the bones further apart. So we call that opposition antagonism, which simply means that one muscle does one thing and the other muscle does the opposite. And another important thing to remember about muscles is they only pull. They never push. So if you start thinking about it, it makes common sense. If they're pulling two bones closer together, okay, they're pulling. They're not set up to do any pushing. Okay? Now we're going to start classifying muscles based on their basic type of function. So we have 4 classes for that. First, I've set up the muscle here, the biceps brachii. That's a muscle that most people are familiar with. And, of course, that's this one. This one, of course, is the triceps brachii, which is on the back side. And again, these muscles are working together in opposition. We call the first one the agonist because this one is doing most of the movement. If you notice, the biceps is much larger than the triceps. So for this reason, we're going to call the agonist the prime mover because it does most of the work. And again, it's common sense. If you go to lift a heavy load, you know as well as I do that the biceps is doing all the work. You're lifting something. So naturally, the biceps is a much larger muscle, the prime mover. It's doing all the work. The antagonist, on the other hand, is aided by gravity. When you go to let down a heavy load, gravity is helping you take the load back down. So the antagonist tends to be a smaller group of muscles, again in opposition to the agonist. Now, a synergist, these are types of muscles that work together, usually to do a common function. I've got the example here of the quadriceps muscles. These are 4 muscles that work together to extend the knee. They're going to be working here, from here to here, on your upper thigh, and they all work together to do a common purpose. Now, a subset of a synergist is the fixator muscles, and these type of muscles work together to hold a bone in a particular position or to immobilize it. I've used the example of the scapula here because if you remember your bones, you know that the scapula rests on top of the ribs. It is held in position by a number of different muscles that are going to hold it in position while your arm moves. So we call those type of muscles fixators because they're holding a bone in position. Now I'm going to move on into how we name muscles. And this can be a really important session because it'll help you as you identify muscles. As you're learning how all these different muscles in the body, it'll help you to understand how they were named. It'll give you a clue as to where they are, what they're doing, things like that. So it's important to get an overall idea of how we name these muscles before you start trying to memorize and locate all these different muscles that we've got. So the first one that I've got a picture of here is based on direction of fibers. Your external oblique is running in the same direction as your ribs, which is an oblique angle. Now, if you remember, transverse is going to run this way, sagittal is going to run this way. An oblique angle will bisect your transverse and sagittal planes. So in this case, the oblique is in the name is referring to the direction of the muscle fibers. Okay? Now the next way that we name muscles is based on action. And as you can see here, we've got quite a lot of different type of actions. And if you're forgetting some of these, you need to go back. If you remember back in the joint section, chapter 8, we talked about all the types of movements that your bones can make. Well, now's the time you need to know what these movements are so that you can understand what the muscles are doing. So if we go to extensors and flexors, when we learn the muscles of the arm, you're going to learn a group name. You're going to learn something called the flexor carpi, and the extensor carpi. And those are group names. That means you don't have to learn the individual muscles that make up this group. So best and easiest way to learn this is to think about what flexion means. First off, if you're in an anatomical position and you flex your wrist, again, carpi is standing for carpal, which we know means the wrist area. So if you flex your wrist, you bring it out of anatomical position. If you extend your wrist, you put it back into anatomical position, or you can hyperextend. Now, if you start thinking about this, this can help you learn where these muscles are. Because if you think about what flexion means, well, and you also think about muscles only pull, well, then by nature you've got to understand that when you flex your wrist, the muscles that are pulling your hand forward have got to be on the same side as the palm of your hand. So think about this. Take your hand, flex it. Think about what's pulling your hand upward to flex it, and that will be the location of your flexors. They will be palm side. So these would be your flexor carpi, the muscles that are in this part of the forearm. Right, the opposite holds true for your extensors. Extensors are going to pull the hand back to anatomical position. So they're going to be back here. They're going to be on the dorsum of the hand, the back side of the hand. This area of the forearm, these muscles will be indicated that this is the extensor carpi. Now some of the other actions, I've got this picture here of the leg. Now if you go back and you think about what abduction and adduction mean, this is showing you a motion that is taking the leg out of anatomical position. That's abduction. Okay? And I had a student tell me a really nice way to remember that. If you abduct a child, you take them away from its home. So we're taking it away. Abduct. Opposite, of course, would be adduction, which is this one. We bring it back, or we add it back. And those are some easier ways to remember adduction versus abduction. Okay? Now go back and review all of these different movements. Think about what they do. For instance, pronators. If you remember what pronation means, that means to pronate the hand. It means take it back to anatomical position. Supination versus pronation. So you're going to learn a muscle called a pronator teres. So that will kind of automatically make you start thinking about pronation, where it is. Okay. Another way that we name muscles is based on location, and that's a super simple way to learn things. So again, go back to your anatomical regions that you learned, things like cervical, thoracic, brachial. These are going to help you place where muscles are. Again, I've got a nice picture here of the biceps brachii. The brachii is referring to the upper arm. That's going to tell you location. So again, as you're learning these muscles, think about the names, how they got the names, and it's going to help you place where it is. Now, some other location parts will be based on the name of the bone. If, for instance, your tibialis anterior, tibia, of course, is the tibia, the bone in your lower leg. So the tibialis anterior is going to be referring you to that location. Tibialis anterior also, the anterior part is giving you a direction. It's telling you that it's toward the front of the leg. So again, as you learn these names of muscles, you're going to be thinking about location. Where is it in the body? And it's going to help you out. Now, one word of warning with the biceps brachii, you need to always remember both parts of this name. Of course, there's a triceps brachii, which is on the back side of the arm, but there's also a biceps femoris. Now, where's your femur? Okay, that's your upper thigh. So if you just write biceps on a test, teachers can't tell if you are talking about arm or the leg. So you've got to be very specific about where this is. So location is going to tell you where it is. Okay. Now, the next way that we name things is based on the number of origins. Now, of course, I need to explain to you what an origin is. I used the example again of the biceps brachii. Biceps, the word bi means two. We're referring to these two origins up here. See these two tendons that are connecting the biceps brachii to bone. So we say that an origin is where the muscle is attached at the non-moving end. Okay? We also call this the anchor, okay? Because it's non-moving. You think of an anchor, you think of something that doesn't move. Now, I used the biceps brachii because it's a muscle everyone, it's very easy to think about your arm moving. So if you think about your arm, and you think about what the biceps does, when it flexes, it brings your forearm closer into the humerus. Right? All these bones are moved closer. So when it does that, this part does not move. When this muscle contracts, it's pulling this bone inward. So this end of the muscle does not move. So we call that the origin, where it starts. Okay? So origin's a really nice way to think of it. Now the insertion is the opposite end. This is the part of the muscle that attaches to bone that's moving. So this one is the moving end. This is where you will find it down here on the radius, where these tendons are going to insert into a bone and pull it back or out of position. Okay. The next way that we name muscles is based on shape. Some of our muscles are based on what people thought of as a particular look. Some of you may know the Greek alphabet. The Greek uppercase letter for delta is a triangle. So someone thought that this particular muscle here, the deltoid, looked like a triangle. Okay? This is the muscle that's right here at the top of your shoulder, causes you to abduct the arm, pull it up, contract and pull your arm outward. So this one was based on shape. The trapezius, your right and your left, these are the muscles of your upper back and shoulder. Together, someone thought that looked like a trapezoid. So again, these were based on shape. Now the last ways that we name muscles are based on points of attachment. And I'm using this muscle here. This is the SCM, the sternocleidomastoid muscle. And it is based on where it attaches, origin and insertion. Now this can be a really good way to learn what an origin is versus an insertion. Because on this one, you don't want to think about the origins as being superior. It doesn't. Sometimes it can be in different locations. We're talking about the origin is the non-moving part of the muscle, the non-moving attachment. The insertion is the moving part. So again, if you think about muscle, when it contracts and shortens, it pulls. Muscle only pulls. So if this particular muscle shortens and pulls together, it's going to be pulling the head. The head is what's going to move. So you're going to contract it down. So obviously here, this is going to be your origin. Now another way, typically with muscles that are named this way, the origin is first. Okay? So we're going to name the origin muscles first, which in this case there are two. The sternum for sterno. Cleido refers to clavicle. And then the insertion would be the mastoid process, which is that large bony process on the back of the skull. So again, this is one way of naming muscles based on where they're attached to the bone. Now the last way that we name muscle is based on relative size, and that's a very easy one. Again, it's going to help you identify muscles. If there's a pectoralis major, it has to be a pectoralis minor. If we're calling something major, then that automatically, we assume there has to be a smaller one. And some of you will be easy if you think about baseball, majors versus the minors. So obviously, the pectoralis major is a much bigger muscle. The minor is going to be much smaller. Now there's another place in the body where we have this kind of naming, and that's the gluteal muscles. Yeah, most everybody in the world knows what the gluteus maximus is, but you're going to be learning all three, the gluteus medius and the gluteus minimus. And again, those are indications of size. Minimus will be the smallest, medius the middle, maximus meaning large. So as you learn these muscles, think back to how they're named, and it's going to really help you learn to identify them. Now one last thing. Some of these muscles, we have already talked about the biceps brachii. I want you to realize that sometimes more than one reason is given for the name. Brachii is, of course, referring to the arm. It's telling you location. Biceps is telling you two origins. Okay? So it's telling you that this muscle has two origins. So as you learn these things, realize that some of these are telling you more than one thing by the name. Well, I appreciate your time and hope you enjoy learning about muscles.